First, cuts to funding mean we won't be able to look after 3/4 of the vulnerable people we currently look after. That's from Mencap in West Berkshire, which has a 15% reduction in the money it gets from the local council will hit respite care services for young people and their families. Julian Swifthook is from West Berkshire Mencap. Hi, Julian.
Good morning, Andrew.
This sounds pretty... Yeah, fine, thanks. This sounds pretty dramatic. So 3/4 of the youngsters you're involved with at the moment in the future will get nothing from you.
Well, I think, firstly, there's a couple of points I need to correct from your introductory remarks.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, the 15% that you mentioned is the proposed cut to all of the funding we receive. That includes the funding we receive for adults, as well as the funding we receive for children. The funding we receive for children is going to be cut by half. That's 50%. And that has a pretty dramatic impact on our ability to deliver the services that we do for children.
So, I mean, but in terms of the number of children left out in the cold effectively by this, you go along with that being 3/4?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we currently are providing services to about 110 children who have a learning disability in West Berkshire. And we've looked at the proposals from West Berkshire Council very carefully, and the best that we can do is hope to offer a service to maybe 28, but probably 22. So do the math, as they say, and that comes out at roughly 3/4 that are likely not to be able to come to us anymore.
And if people are wondering how the maths work, so you have a 15% reduction in funding and 75% reduction in the number of kids you can look after. Presumably that's because the most serious cases, the most needy children, the most expensive cases will still get you.
Well, sorry, you're mentioning the 15% again. It's not 15, it's 50, and that's a really important difference.
Yeah, sure, yeah, okay.
The second thing for me to say is actually we are very lucky and very successful with volunteers. In fact, we were awarded the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service this last year, which is, if you like, the MBA for voluntary organisations. Basically because a lot of the people that work with us in order to look after the children are actually volunteers. But of course, in order for the volunteers to work for us, we have to have a basis of trained staff who have undergone all the right CRB checks and training and so on to work with the children. And the volunteers add the capacity. If we start cutting funding, the volunteers don't get paid, obviously, but the trained staff have to be. If our funding gets cut, then we have to start letting staff go. And if we have to let staff go, then our ability to deliver the service is actually really quite severely impacted. The gearing is quite dramatic.
So you're doing like a petition for West Berkshire Council and all of that. That's not going to get anywhere, though, is it? Because these cuts are just going to happen, aren't they?
Well, you may think that, as they say. I'm sincerely hoping that the petition will, in fact, draw the attention of the people at West Berkshire Council who are making the decisions, and they will actually recognise that this is one particular cut that they really haven't thought through properly. I think we're all agreed that in the current financial climate, cuts have to be made, and nobody's disagreeing with that. But you need to look at the impact, the unintended consequences of any cuts that are made. I mean, we've written a 5-page report that we've sent to West Berkshire Council to explain in detail why this service cut would have to follow from the financial cut that they're proposing. We haven't had much back from them on that yet. But the concern that I've got is, as you said at the top of this item, you were mentioning the cut as 15%. That's the publicity that's coming out of the council. So, you and anybody listening would think, well, 15%, it's a cut, but it's not huge. What they're not recognising is that actually the money we get from the council, firstly, it's not a gift, it's not a donation, it's actually money that they pay us in return for services that we are contracted to provide. That's one important point to make. And secondly, because it's done in that way, the money we receive for other services, for the adult services, for example, they are legally ring-fenced. We're not allowed to spend the money we receive for adult services on our children's services. We cannot cross-subsidise in the way that people might intuitively think we can.
Julian, thank you. Julian Swift-Hook. So we're getting different figures from different people, as is so often the way with stories like this. It's frustrating because you think, well, the truth lies in there somewhere. So while we have one organisation telling us one set of figures and another organisation telling us a different set of figures is, as I say, irritating, but we'll work with it. So the council say this funding is being cut by 15% and the charities say it's being cut by 50%. What really matters are the people affected. Let's meet Tracy, who lives in Newbury with her 12-year-old daughter Tiffany, who's got learning disabilities. Hi, Tracy.
Hello.
Good to have you here. What's the impact of whatever this cut is going to be on you and Tiffany?
Well, the impact's going to be, immediately, obviously, it's the uncertainty of not knowing whether this is going to happen or not, so you've got it hanging over your head permanently. My daughter attends a fair few of the clubs that go on at Mencap. Her social life, that's the only social life she's got out of school, because obviously with children like we've got, they don't get a chance to be able to go into town and do all the things that other children of that age may be able to do. So her social life would be impacted completely if she lost her places down there. My social life would be impacted because obviously I'm allowed to do things while she's at Mencap and being cared for by all the girls and everything down there. And it's just, I don't even know where to begin, the impact of it. It's just, they are such a supportive group. I've taken cuts for within disability living allowance, and they're helping me fight the system to reinstate that for Tiffany. So they help you in every possible way that they can. They are so, they're just there for everything. It's not just the child. They support the whole family.
So, it's tough, isn't it? Because you might say, well, what you're describing is fantastic and, she gets a lot of value from it, but it's not essential in terms of her care. It's a social life for her, and it might be something that can't be afforded.
It is essential for her care, because at the end of the day, if, when you've got a child like, I have and many other people have got, it's very hard to be able to trust somebody else to be able to take care of that child when they're not in your care. So to have that trust in somebody that enables you to be able to have a bit of time to yourself and give that child everything else they need, that is very essential to many, many families.
So if it's taken away, have you begun to kind of work around what you'll do instead, how you'll organise life?
I haven't even begun to think about it, to be honest, because Tiffany's been going to Mencap for about the last 3 years, and it's just everything is there that you need, and it's just sort of like I can't even begin to forget where we will go if she loses her places down there.
Does Tiffany know this is going on?
No, because she's her comprehension wouldn't.
Sure.
She wouldn't be able to understand that. So.
I was just wondering whether there was, any sense among the people at the centre that there was this sort of sword of Damocles hanging over it, and it was, the joy had already been sucked out of it by this threat of closure, or are things just going on as normal there?
There is a downside. Yeah, obviously there are sort of the downside to it, because more so the parents, I would imagine, because the majority of the children that are learning, who've got learning disabilities, don't understand the concept of all of everything that's going on. But obviously it's put a damper on all the parents, yeah.
I'm really pleased that you came on the show this morning to talk about it, Tracy. Thanks so much, and we'll keep tabs on the story. We'll see what happens. Good luck to you.
Okay. Thank you.
That's Tracy in Newbury. I'd like to hear from you if you're affected by this. My number is 0845 900 1041. When you hear about a centre that a young girl with learning disabilities goes to that is her social life, does that sound like a nice to have to you? Something we can do away with and say, we just can't afford that anymore? Or does that sound essential, as Tracy's been telling us? 0845 900 1041, 717. Barbara's in Newbury. Hello, Barbara.
Hello.
Morning.
Hello.
So our main news this morning is about West Berkshire Mencap having serious cuts made to their funding. The overall budget cut by 15%, but in some cases budgets are being cut by 50%. How are you and your family going to be affected, Barbara?
Well, like others, we're going to be affected massively, because it's not just the child. There are so many dimensions to having a special needs child, not least of which is the tremendous pressure and stress and emotional drain that it costs. Now, Helen going to Mencap on a Thursday...
This is your daughter?
That's my daughter, yes. She's autistic, she's 16. It's just like an oasis. It's like, oh, hello, darling, I'm married to you. We still have a marriage. So many marriages break up because there is no time for each other anymore. And so actually I think West Berkshire are cutting their nose off to spite their face, because if they can help the child and the family as much as they do now, like Mencap, who are extraordinarily gifted in that department, they will save themselves money in the long run with adult mental health issues, marriages and divorces, and just loads of things. It's so silly doing this to children, because the children grow up and so do problems, and if you can nip them in the bud, they're not so big later on. It doesn't make economic sense.
I mean, I can't imagine anybody listening is going to think anything other than it sounds brilliant, to have a social life, a place where young people who've got all sorts of difficulties will get, go there to enjoy themselves, but also will get looked after just for a short time each week, so that you can talk to your husband. I bet what you actually do with the time is use it to do practical things, if I'm honest, Barbara. You talk about, looking your husband in the eye going, yeah, I'm married to you. I bet what you really do is go to the supermarket or something, isn't it?
Exactly. But, they're not just going to be looked after. These are trained staff. They teach them social skills. They nurture them each week. So each week they are growing into what they can be, the best they can be. And that's what they need in order to save problems later on.
So your fear is that, you make a cut like this and you'll just create other problems as a result of it.
And cost yourself more money in the long run.
Which then costs. Well, that's an argument about a lot of things that are being cut, isn't it? Barbara, thank you. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
And you, bye.
Barbara in Newbury, if you're affected by this, cuts to these services provided by Mencap in West Berkshire, 0845 900 1041. Our main news is about funds which get given to West Berkshire Mencap that are going to be cut. The overall amount of money they get is being cut by 15%, but some of the budgets they get are being cut by 50%. The impact, as we've heard from Tracy in Newbury and from Barbara who phoned, is going to be great on the families who are currently getting services from West Berkshire Mencap, these respite centres which provide a social life and a bit of a break for parents and other people who are involved in looking after children with learning difficulties. Let's talk to Laura Courtney now, who's the campaign manager for the group Every Disabled Child Matters. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
What I'm interested to know is whether children in West Berkshire, families in this sort of situation, are getting super served by West Berkshire Mencap at the moment, or are they just getting the same kind of help that is available to families in this situation everywhere?
I'm not an expert in West Berkshire Mencap, but it does sound to me like they're getting the kind of things that families really need and have told us over the years are absolutely vital services, just to keep them going, to keep them from breaking point.
Is it the same sort of stuff that happens elsewhere, though? I mean, are we talking about the same sort of respite care that will be available in Bracknell or Slough or, Manchester or Birmingham, for that matter?
Absolutely. I mean, over the past few years, there's been a great increase in the quality of these kind of services in many areas, and there's been some really good work done by local authorities to make sure that families are getting them. The problem that we're seeing is that now the cuts to budgets are hitting, and they're hitting in different ways. Some services are closing, some people are losing their jobs, that we are beginning to hear this kind of story where services are closing down.
Is there a debate about whether, having a place that kids with learning disabilities can go on a Thursday, which is a social life for them and a break for their families, is there a debate about whether that's a nice to have or an essential thing?
I think it's important to realise the context of the lives of families with disabled children. So many parents of disabled children are full-time carers, which means that when we talk about getting a break, we're not talking about, having a nice time. We're talking about time to have a shower, go to the shops, to spend time with other children who sometimes you aren't able to spend as much time with. And so it's not a nice to have in that respect, because also what we hear, last year we heard in the national press the story of Riven Vincent, who is a mother who posted on Mumsnet that she was thinking of having her child taken into care because she wasn't getting really a break from a 24-hour caring routine. And
has someone decided that it's a nice to have and therefore it's okay to make these cuts?
Well, the interesting thing is, particularly in terms of respite or short breaks, as we call them, the government has invested a lot of good practice, so it's been telling local authorities that it thinks it really is important. There's actually a new duty came into force in April 2011 to provide these breaks from carings because it has been considered, that this is a lifeline. It actually keeps families together. I think the problem that we have is that the funding for it goes through this big fund called the Early Intervention Grant and isn't ring-fenced. So while I think there's a lot of good progress in terms of local areas knowing that this is important, what we don't know, and I'm afraid what the government doesn't know either, is what the impact of the big cuts to local authority budgets is having on these individual services across the country.
OK, Laura, thanks ever so much for coming on. That's Laura Courtney from Every Disabled Child Matters. If you're affected by this, I'd like to hear from you. If you have a child with learning disabilities, if you've raised a child with learning disabilities, is having respite care a nice to have or something essential? It may well be that when you were raising a child in this sort of situation, such things didn't exist. Did you do all right? It was an absolute nightmare without things like this. 0845 900 1041. More about this on the way for you. It's 12 minutes to 8 now.
BBC Radio Berkshire.
Graham Jones from West Berkshire Council right now. Hello, Graham.
Good morning, Andrew.
Good to have you with us. Let me ask you first of all about this cut to the money you give to Mencap. Have you looked at the services they provide and decided that some of them are non-essential? They're nice to have things.
Well, first off, Andrew, we haven't as yet decided what we're doing with the money. What we've done is we've gone out for an impact assessment with a whole range of the voluntary sector. So what would be the situation if? So as we can understand what that would be. So at the moment we're in a consultation phase.
So you're in the process of asking that question?
Exactly. So that closes on the 20th of this month. So I encourage anybody who's wants to have an input into that to get get a submission in.
Right. I mean, and just to be clear, we've had, quite a few families affected by this speaking on the air this morning. Does speaking on the air count as having, made their voice heard? Or do you have to fill in a council form for that?
Well, I certainly encourage everybody to go onto the council website. It's all there, and certainly all the voluntary organisations are putting submissions in. Can they do it? And we're having a very interesting discussion.
Is it?
With alternative proposals.
Is what no one thinks that what you're doing is easy, right? But do you have to look at the services provided by an organisation like Mencap and say, okay, what is essential? Because if it's essential, we can't touch it.
Yes, we do. And as I said, we have to look at what's discretionary and what's statutory. And,
that's not necessarily quite the same, is it? But anyway,
everybody will define essential or non-essential in a very slightly different way. Certainly, we're not in nobody in local government is in an easy situation, and we do have to look at what the council has to provide and what it doesn't have to provide.
So, if the sort of services we're hearing about on the show this morning, if they get cut, if the respite care, a couple of hours on a Thursday, social life for kids with learning disabilities, break for their parents, if that kind of thing is cut, that means it's been defined as non-essential.
It's going through that process at the moment, and
but that's what it would mean, isn't it? It would mean you've decided as a council, well, that's a nice to have. It's not an essential thing for those families.
Yeah, we're in the situation where we cannot spend beyond our means, and we do have to make valued judgment here, and sorry, excuse me, it's not easy, but we are trying to do this in as fair and an open way as possible.
So people who are bothered, people who are concerned by what they're hearing this morning, need to get in touch.
They do, yes.
This week.
This week the consultation closes on the 20th, and we do then have to finalise our budget proposals. So we are in a fairly tight timescale. It's all doable, and we do want to be as fair and open as possible. But
do you worry about what families have said on the show this morning, which is if you make a cut here, all you do is create a problem somewhere else? It costs money in some other way.
Yes, and that's exactly the sort of feedback that we need. And I've had discussions with Mencap who they're coming back with some slightly different proposals to the ones which we were talking about. And there's all sorts. all sorts of the voluntary sector is in different places with different things. So, we need to understand that.
Graham, thanks ever so much for coming on this morning. That's Graham Jones, who's the leader of West Berkshire Council. If you're affected, if you have a view about whether respite care, day centres for a couple of hours, socialising is something that people with the sort of situation we've heard about this morning, families got children with learning disabilities, need, or it's just a nice to have, my number is 0845 900 1041. Whichever side of that